Hello and welcome to this quick start guide on how to use the Narrative Navigator plugin. I'm here in the Narrative Content Examples hall, and Narrative Navigator essentially adds a bunch of navigators to your game. Navigators are like the compass that you can see, the mini-map that you can see. It comes with a world map, which I'm using with a gamepad right now, but if I switch to mouse and keyboard, it seamlessly moves over and allows for either input to work. And you can see I've got some stands here with some of the features. Here I'm showing overrides. You can see I've got a different icon on the compass as I do on the minimap. You can see movement is really easily handled. Even points of interest is a really cool one. So points of interest is very common in open world games. You might have a city or something. Here I've got narrative city. And once you discover the point of interest, you can then fast travel to it. So that's a little feature that I added as well. And these are all saved to disk. So if you find a point of interest, it will be saved. When you come back into the game, it will be remembered. Also, custom waypoints can be placed on your world map. If I press A to place a waypoint down, these are saved to disk. If I save my game and come back in, these will be right where I left them. So these are really good for open world games as well. You might want to add custom waypoints to remember where you need to go. And of course, if you're using Narrative 3 to handle your quests and your dialogue, it works really well for quests. You can see it's telling me to talk to Jack. This is a quest objective, and I'll show you how to handle those with Navigator as well. You can see once I finish the quest objective, it removes the marker, right? So it works really well with quests, and we'll talk about that later. You do not have to use it with quests though. Narrative Navigator works really well on its own, and it also works really well with the other plugins. In order to follow along with today's video, you'll need a copy of Narrative Navigator. The link to buy that will be in the description. And you will also need a copy of Narrative Common UI. The link to grab that will also be in the description. Narrative Common UI is free to download. It's a framework that all of the UI for the narrative tools is built on. I'm going to be using 5.3 today, but you can use 5.1, 5.2, or 5.3, and we're going to go to Games and make a new third-person blueprint project. You can call it whatever you want, put it wherever you want, and then click on Create. Okay, so I'm here inside of my project. I'm going to go to Edit, Plugins, and make sure that I have Narrative Common UI and Narrative Navigator enabled. Pretty much all of the narrative tools require that you set up Narrative Common UI, so make sure that you do that. It's very easy to do. You want to go to Project Settings, search for Viewport, make sure that you're using the Common Game Viewport client, and then you also want to go to Common Input Settings, make sure that you select Narrative Input Data, and then under Windows, I'm using Windows. If you're using a different platform like Linux or something else, you might want to put it in there, but I'm going to put it in Windows. We're going to change the default gamepad name to generic. I'm going to add 2 controller datas. We're going to add keyboard, and then because I'm using an Xbox controller today as well, we're going to do gamepad Xbox. Once you've done that, click on Restart Now. Okay, we're back inside the project. Let's get started. So we're going to go to third-person blueprints, and there's quite a bit of stuff the third-person template doesn't come with, so we just have to quickly add it. It's not a big deal. Just go to blueprint class. You want to add a player controller. So we'll say BPPC. Go into your game mode, and then you want to select the player controller that we just made. And then we're also going to add some HUD, because Narrative Navigator is essentially a HUD based sort of plugin. So we're going to make a demo HUD for this project. So we'll just call it Widget Blueprint HUD. And I'll just drag in a canvas panel. I'm going to drag in a narrative HUD. Generally you want to have one of these on your HUD. And we're going to make it fill up the whole screen. So just follow what I'm doing here. And then Narrative Navigator comes with a bunch of what are called navigators. And if you search for Navigator in the palette, you'll find a bunch of them. So I'm going to drag a Navigator compass onto my canvas panel. And then I'll select the compass here. And I'm going to put it in the top of the screen. So I'll do 0, 0, 600, 60, 0.5 for my alignment. For position Y, I'll do 40. So you can see the compass is sort of in the top middle of the screen here. I'm also going to drag a mini-map navigator onto my canvas panel. And I will make that 400 by 400. And you can put it wherever you like. I'm going to go for the top right corner. So that's going to be my mini-map. Screen space markers are a nice one to have as well. So we're going to drag that onto our canvas panel, and we're going to go to anchors and do 0, 0, 0, 0 so that it takes up the whole screen. And then we'll compile and save this, and we're going to add it to the screen. So we'll open up our player controller. We'll go to begin play, create widget, the HUD we just made. I'm going to promote it to a variable. We'll just call that HUD. And then we'll do add to viewport. The other thing we need to do is make sure you have a navigation component on your player controller. We're going to add one like this. Now, the only option that actually matters here is max custom waypoints. These options here are legacy and they'll be removed. You won't see these in future versions. But we will compile, save, and we'll come into the map here and we'll hit play. You'll see that it doesn't really work, right? You can see that the map's just sort of showing this default blue grid. It's not quite working yet. And the main issue is that we don't have a nice, lovely screenshot of our map. So Narrative Navigator comes with a great tool called the Map Tile Generator that does this for you. And the way Narrative Navigator works is it generates a grid of tiles, and that way, no matter what size your map is, you can generate a map grid for it. So if you go to Plugins, Narrative Navigator Content, yours might be in the Engine folder, Plugins, by the way. But wherever you have yours, go to Assets, Map Tile Generator, and then right-click on the Utility Generate Map Tiles and run the utility widget. And basically, this is going to take a screenshot of the map. You might want to hide some things if you don't want them to show up. So, for example, these chamfer cubes, I'm just going to click the eye to hide those. I don't want them in my map screenshot. I mean, generally, you probably scrub the screenshots up a bit in Photoshop anyway. But for this example, we'll just hide them. And the last thing we need to do is just drag in a map tile bound. So this is basically how your map screenshot will be taken. And the default one is way too big for our map. So we might want to go into map width and sort of turn the width down a bit. And by default, it uses 3 tiles. So it'll be a 3x3 grid. Each tile is 1024 by 1024 pixels. So this will be plenty of resolution, if not way more than we need. The height is also important. You need to make sure it's high enough so that it's above the map so that it takes the image correctly. So once you've got that placed correctly, we'll go into our map tile generator, click on generate tiles. I've actually already got some, so what I'll do is I'll just delete the existing ones that I have. If I go into here, I've generated a few previously, so I'm going to delete my ones. If you click it, it'll generate them all. It basically just moves the camera over the map and saves it to a texture. You can see, here is it here. Anyhow, once you do that, if I hit play, you'll see it actually shows the map now. If I run around, it's a little bit too zoomed in for my personal liking. And so if you want to zoom it out, very easily done. We're going to go to Widget Blueprint HUD. We'll go back to here, click on our minimap, and we are going to go to map zoom and just make it 0.2. And if we save that, you can see now if I go back into the game, the map is nice and zoomed out. So we've got some navigators like the compass, screen space, the minimap markers, but how do we actually add markers to things? Well, we're going to add a marker to those cubes. So I'm going to come back in here and re-show these, and I'll just add it to one of the cubes. So we'll add it to this one here. I'm going to click on add. I'm going to search for marker and add a navigation marker, and that's it. If I hit play, that'll just work already. If I hit play, you can see on the compass it's showing up. On my minimap, it's showing that marker. But if you click the navigation marker, we can do a lot more than that. So if we go to default marker settings, we could, for example, change the color of the map marker. We could make it more blue. We could change the name. For example, we could say cube. And you can also change sort of the domain of the marker. Where does it get added to? You can see add marker to. If I check screen space, it will actually add it to the screen space navigator. Now you can see in my screen space there is a cube marker that shows up. Or for example, if I didn't want it to show up on the compass, I could just come in here and uncheck compass. And now if I hit play, you can see the icon won't be on my compass. So you can choose where it shows up. We're going to go back into our controller, and I just want to show you something here. If we do face button, top, I'm going to make it so when I press the Y key on my gamepad, it opens the world map. So the world map is like a bigger map that you can sort of zoom into and add waypoints to. It's a bit more complex than the mini map. And so we're going to do get narrative HUD. And then we can open a menu. And depending on how many narrative tools you're using, you'll see more or less options here, but we want the narrative menu world map that comes with Navigator. I'm also going to duplicate this and select the M key so that on my keyboard, if I press the M key, it'll also open the map. Compile and save. Hit play, and if I have a gamepad, if I press Y on my gamepad, you can see it will open the world map. And in the bottom corner it says place custom waypoint. So if I press A, you can see it actually places a custom waypoint, and you can see that has appeared in the level. And these actually get saved to disk. I'll show you a bit more about those later. But the cool thing is this world map, it has a little reticle and it supports zooming in and out. And if I just switch over to a mouse and keyboard, you can see it instantly changes and instantly starts working with the mouse and keyboard as well. You can see it's not going to let me zoom in very far, so we can sort of tinker with these things a bit further than we have. In our HUD as well, we also want to make sure the narrative HUD is on top of everything else. You would have seen just then the world map didn't look very good. If I put it on top of everything else, now you can see it looks a lot better. So just make sure that you have the narrative HUD in front of everything else. The world map is pretty cool. You can see if I hover over the cube, it actually tells me it's the cube. And there's even interactable things. So there's sort of points of interest that you can fast travel to that we'll talk about in a little bit. One of the other things you might really want to do is change the style of some of the map things. So for example, the mini map in the corner can easily be styled to whatever you want. If we click on the mini map here, expand the map style section, there's a bunch of styles that come with it. So if we do distorted edge flat border, for example, it's quite an interesting style. If I hit play, you can see I've got this sort of metal edge, and it's also warping the edges of the map. It might be a little bit hard to see, but if you look at that marker, it sort of looks like it's got a glass top, the map. So it's quite interesting. Quite a cool little effect. I think distorted edge without the flat border is probably a little bit of a better look. Actually, I kind of like the border more. So you can play around and see what you like for your game. And you can always add more. This is just a data table. And if I open that up, you can see you can easily create your own styles if you want them. Also just going to put my mini-map a little bit further out here. So yeah, one annoying thing with my world map here is it's not letting me zoom very far into the world map. And that's because it's quite a small map, so generally it wouldn't let you zoom that far. Because we have a small map, we want to be able to zoom a lot further into the map. If you're noticing this text here, by the way, this is just an Unreal render target thing. Usually you wouldn't have this because you wouldn't have just empty sky. It's because there's nothing below the map. It puts that little error message in there. So I wouldn't worry about it. In a real game, you'd never really see that. Anyways, let me show you how to let the map zoom out further. If you want to change the zoom amounts, what you can do is go to Narrative Navigator, go into the Widgets folder, Navigation Widgets, and open up the World Map Navigator. So Navigator Map World. If you open that up, in the graph defaults, you should be able to change the min and max zoom values. Actually, you have to click on Navigator Map here. And here it is here. Yeah, min zoom amount. So you can set a min and max zoom amount. I might go with 0.005. And we'll see if that lets me zoom further in. Oh, that's letting me zoom further out. So if I do max zoom amount 0.3, for example, it'll let me zoom in a lot further. There we go. So I can now zoom in quite far. You obviously don't want to zoom in too far because you'll start to see pixels and blurriness. But that's a lot better. And you can see if I start using a controller, it just automatically allows me to use a controller. If you see the message there, it just says that there's a sky sphere that's not being rendered. So if you've been paying attention, you'll know how to add a player to the map. You just open up our player and just add a marker to it. Navigation marker. Boom. Done. If I hit play, you can see our player shows up on the marker. They also show up on the compass though, which is not really, they're not really supposed to do that. So all we need to do, again, is just go to add marker to, uncheck compass. And there's also quite a few markers that actually come with Narrative Navigator out of the box. We're going to change to the player icon. And I'm also going to make our player be sort of a nice glow. And I'm going to check the box that says show actor rotation. And that way it will show the rotation of the actor. And you can see now we've got quite a nice little marker. Looks pretty good. I'll also go to the display name and I'm just going to say your player. And what that's going to do is if I ever open the world map and hover over our player, you can see it says your player. Generally, you don't need to worry about transforms. Like you can see if I walk into this box, you can see the marker's just moving itself around. You don't have to do anything. It's all coded to sort of work for you. Other things you might want to do is you can see this cube's got this sort of default marker on it and we've given it a nice blue color. Let's say you want it to have a different color on the minimap as you do for the other navigators. I'm going to select the cube here, and if you go to its marker, you've got all these override settings. So if you ever want it to have a different color on the minimap, for example, you can go down to icon tint, and we can make it green, for example, on the minimap. And now if I hit play, you can see it will be green on the minimap, but it will be blue everywhere else. So it's quite nice to be able to do overrides. If you go into Narrative Navigator content, blueprints, you've got this BP point of interest actor, and this is quite an interesting actor, so I'll show you how this works. If you drag it into the level, you can create a bit of a point of interest. So that's obviously a feature that a lot of open world games would want. So here's my point of interest, and to configure the point of interest, we're going to go to POI tags. I'm going to click add. You do need to go to source and select a source, and I'm just going to say POIs dot, and then I'll give it some sort of name, circle thingy, and I'll move this point of interest to the circle thingy. Also want to give it a display name, so we're going to set the display name to circle thingy. I'm going to make sure I select that tag that I made, and you can make them a little bit more organized than this if you want. So with this all set up and placed in the level, the other thing you want to configure is this fast travel location. So fast traveling is sort of a feature that's been built in, and it works with these POIs. So you can put this wherever you want. And I'll just show you. In the current version, it won't actually show the notification message, but you can see when I run up to it, it turns from a transparent color to sort of a visible color. So we've now discovered this POI. And once you discover a point of interest, if you hover over it, you can now fast travel to it. And if I click on it, you can see it will fast travel me based on where I put that fast travel spot. So it's quite nice. And it works with world partitions for bigger maps as well. It'll make sure the area of the map has actually been loaded in before it fast travels you. If I use a gamepad, same thing. I can move over to the POI. I can hit A and it will fast travel me to the location. If I just restart the game, I just want to show you, if you try and hover over the location that you haven't discovered yet, it will not actually show you that you can fast travel to it. It'll show you the location name, but nothing else. You won't actually be able to interact with it. If you're using Narrative 3 quests, I've got a quest here, I'm going to accept it. And you can see it adds a marker. We have to talk to Baxter, and we're going to talk to him, and it should remove the marker, and it should tell me to go back to Jack. So you can see you can add quest markers. How do you do that? Well, all you do is you can see we've got a task here, for example. Just add an event, and there's one that comes with the plugin. It is add navigation marker, and this lets you add a quest marker you give it a task ID, and it automatically will add it to the right thing. And it will remove the marker when you complete the task. So that's kind of a nice way to have it set up with quests. There might be a bit more of a robust way to do it, or a way that will work better for your game, but that's a nice built-in way into the plugin that lets you do that within quests. Last thing I want to show you that I think I said I would talk about is these custom waypoints. So with the mouse and keyboard, you can double click to add custom waypoints. But how do you save them to disk? Well, it's really easy to do. We're going to go into our controller. Open that up. I'm going to hook the 1 key up to save the game, and I'm going to hook the 2 key up to load the game. Drag in narrative navigation, save when we press the 1 key, and load when we press the 2 key. It not only saves every waypoint you've found, it also saves every point of interest that you've discovered, which is really useful. So when your player comes back to your game, it'll remember all of the POIs you found before, which is really useful. So what I'll do, I'll just prove this. We'll go ahead and discover the circle POI that I made, and we will add a couple of waypoints, and then we'll hit 1 on my keyboard to save. We'll close the game, we'll come back, everything's gone now, but if we press 2, boom, loads it all back in. It remembers that we've found this POI. So really nice, all saved to disk, just like all the other narrative plugins. So that is a general overview of how to use Narrative Navigator. Hopefully that has been helpful. And if you need any more help, of course, we're always around in the Discord, and the link for that will be in the description. So yeah, I hope you pick up Navigator and give it a go. Thanks for watching. See you later.